Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. More drivers joining the list of those that will take penalties for this weekend's Monza Grand Prix come Sunday. Max Verstappen will start from P6 at best come the race, but will that actually make any difference at all, given the supreme once again displayed by the Red Bull so far in practice? Very much into your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. Loads of new subs yesterday. Let's hop right into things. Big news of the day first of all being that Porsche, the arrangement with Red Bull is now no longer going ahead. We heard this for quite some time, that Porsche Red Bull, it was going to be a thing, but then Porsche said, okay, we want 50% of your team, your actual F1 team, to kind of not just be the engine supplier, but also take over part ownership in Red Bull Racing, effectively. Red Bull say, no, we want to do things internally or independently, and therefore they couldn't come to an agreement where, you know, engine partnership that doesn't just benefit everyone, effectively. So, bit of a strange one, the fact that this seemed like it was so close to happening. The Audi thing is confirmed with Sauber pretty much, and then, well, as Porsche say now, this could not be achieved where we would be not only an engine partner but also, you know, part of the team itself, and with the finalized rule changing. So they're still not ruling this out. They still think F1's attractive and Porsche want to get involved. I would kind of like them just to say, you know what, let's just be our own team, right? Why not just enter? Because Porsche are obviously, like, you know, Formula 1, the other teams are going to seemingly want Porsche involved because of what they can bring to the sport. I wonder if they can just enter either without any partner or partnering with somebody else. But the thing is, even if you're like a McLaren or something, right, and if Porsche's terms are, we're going to take over 50% of your business, then, you know, which teams are actually going to be interested, unless they partner with like an Andretti or something, that I'm sure would be on the dream list of Andretti to make that happen, because that would get them into Formula 1. But at the same time, why would Porsche do that, right? Why wouldn't they just do it themselves? So we shall see. If they're really committed to getting into F1, they might just do it themselves. I suppose we'll see about that and not just be an engine supplier, but yeah, I suppose we can stay tuned for that one. Now, of course, talking of drivers for next season, apparently this is who the favourites are, according to Will Buxton, for the respective seats. We don't know what's going on with the Colton Herta thing. That's kind of stalled from IndyCar. Can he get the super license points? Maybe, maybe not. If he can't, then he finds himself in a spot where he can't come to Formula 1. Therefore, Gasly won't be going to Alpine, and therefore maybe Jack Doohan, I think their Formula 2 guy, who recently won the Spa feature race, I believe, in Formula 2, he could be promoted. Joe's going to stay at AlphaTauri, which is good. Giovinazzi apparently is the favourite for Haas, and even if Nico Hülkenberg is actually the favourite, it's like, you know, I'm not really convinced personally. And then Williams might get De Vries or Logan Sargent from their Formula 2 programme. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not convinced by the potential competition of the driver grid next year if these are the drivers we get, but I suppose we shall have to stay tuned. Let's dive into then what was going on in practice today, but also what some of these grid penalties look like. So Ferrari out on track with their new livery. The rear wing especially does look lovely. The rest of the car I'm still not quite convinced. These are all the upgrades. Largely these are to do with lower downforce settings. So Mercedes, a new front wing flap, beam wing as well. Ferrari have a new beam wing on the back of their car to try and reduce the downforce, but also therefore reduce the drag. So most teams bringing something this weekend. AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo, Haas, they're not really bothering. And even Aston Martin, of course, we saw their pretty unique rear wing flap that we talked about in yesterday's video. Now, going into the day, our understanding was that there was a fair few penalties on the horizon. For Hamilton, we know about. Albon, we heard about. Potentially Bottas, Tsunoda, all these drivers. Now, seemingly there might be even more than that. Fastest pit stop reckons Verstappen, Perez, Sainz, Hamilton, Albon, Schumacher, Bottas, Magnussen, Tsunoda, and Alonso all might be due for some sort of penalty. Now, that, like, all penalties are not made equal. Some penalties are worse than others, which has a very interesting impact on what the grid actually looks like. We saw it back in Spa. It's a bit of a mess, to be honest, but I feel like this is one way that you can actually get away with the top teams not just plonking a new engine into their car every weekend, which honestly, Verstappen and Red Bull might be able to get away with, and even just take a 5-place penalty every week and still win the entire Grand Prix, because that is probably what will happen this weekend again on current evidence. But of course, yes, it makes sense to do the power unit changes here, especially for a team like Red Bull, where you're going to have, well, an absolutely monstrous advantage potentially in a straight line, and therefore around Monza, that can be rather beneficial. Now, Bottas, as it was standing at this point from Adam Cooper, was only going to be a new V6, that's a new internal combustion engine, new turbo, new MGUH, which means a 15-place grid penalty. Any more than 15, and it's effectively considered back of the grid. But if you're already taking a 15-place penalty, then, you know, one might argue, why not just take the entire lot and take another couple of parts and just start from the back? The benefit of not doing that, though, is that you start above all the drivers that have back of the grid penalties, which is anything effectively above 15. So, bit of a mess. But then confirmation was coming through that Verstappen will indeed take another V6 engine. engine, which is a bit of a surprise because he took a new engine, of course, and an entirely new power unit back in Spa. That cost him to the back of the grid. But every single individual component you take in addition to what you're allowed to, that's a 10-place grid drop. But after the first one you take, the second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever above what you're allowed is only a 5-place penalty. We saw Hamilton not exactly exploit this last season, but it was a talking point at the end of the year when Mercedes put a couple of new engines in. For example, in Brazil, Hamilton had an incredibly powerful engine which he could run at a higher, higher rate than other cars, because other cars were hoping that their engines would last them to the end of the year. Hamilton was like, well, look, we'll just put a new engine in, run it at pretty much max power, and just, absolutely smoke people in a straight line, which was an effective strategy last season. And people were even suggesting, could Hamilton go to every single race weekend, bring a new power unit, take the 5-place, or bring a new ICE, because it's only a 5-place penalty after the first one, just start from P6 every weekend, and then just, run the engine as if it's literally going to last one race, like absolutely max it out of control, kind of like the, the drag racers do when their engine is literally going to do one run and then it has to be repaired. Like, maybe just max out the engine and just smoke everyone the entire Grand Prix with a monstrous straight line speed advantage and then just win the race anyway. That might be, to some degree, Verstappen and Red Bull's plan here. But as it stands, Hamilton, Sainz, Bottas and Tsunoda all the way to the back of the grid. Tsunoda already taken a 10-place penalty as a reprimand, or effectively he got too many reprimands in a row and therefore he has to go to the back anyway as a driver penalty effectively. So they thought, you know what, if he's getting docked 10 places, we might as well just take an entirely new power unit anyway. Perez, for now, only 10 places. Kind of surprising just because Verstappen, when he took his new engine in Spa, that Perez was expected to do here in Monza, he took so many new components and started from the back. Perez is not taking, that many new parts, but Verstappen will be taking a new ICE, which will mean he starts from 6th at the very best. Now look, 6th might not be the end of the world for Verstappen based on what we saw before, but it does seem like he is kind of speed running, trying to win from every position on the grid. He did 10th, he did 14th, he did 1st on the grid, of course, in Zandvoort, and now he's going to try and do 6th or 7th or however it works out. The other question, of course, here is, why exactly did they need to take a new engine? Because the thought was, after Spa, that, the engine should have been fine, right, from Spa to potentially the end of the season, right? That was their 4th one. They thought maybe after Spa they could do to the end of the year, or maybe just one more to the end of the year or whatever. But just 2 races after Spa, they're now taking an entirely new engine, kind of implying that, I think people have said that the engine might have been somewhat damaged. Maybe they run it at, really high range, right? Maybe they run it at max power setting or whatever at Spa and Zandvoort, or, whatever the case is. But a little bit strange to me that just 2 races after they took a penalty for a power unit change, they're now taking another ICE effectively, which maybe Max Verstappen's just going to keep on doing. They'll keep running it at very high power modes and just keep winning every race from P6, which seems like a viable strategy with how fast that Red Bull is right now. So these are the penalties as they currently stand. We believe that Verstappen will have a 5-place penalty, I think, instead of 10. Perez will be at least 10, maybe to the back of the grid. Hamilton will be back of the grid. Sainz will be back of the grid as well, as has been recently confirmed. Bottas and Tsunoda the same. So there is still some incentive for those drivers that have all the way to the back to go out in qualifying, try and out-qualify each other, because, Hamilton, for example, if he beats Bottas and Tsunoda, he'll start P18 rather than P20, for example, which of course is, a pretty big deal as the race progresses. So this, I believe, is kind of the updated number with Sainz plus, 15 plus 10, plus, I believe, another control electronics he's taken. That relegates him to back of the grid, but he was top of FP2, that we'll see in a second. So, of course, it does mean that Ferrari have effectively the secured pole position for Charles Leclerc, you would think. The other drivers around them are taking penalties, like Leclerc should have the pole position home and dry. But, of course, pole position might not mean that much if Max Verstappen is starting from P6, and, of course, he's won from P10, P14, he should be able to win for P6 relatively easily, you would think, especially with a brand new engine on pretty high power modes, especially if, indeed, the pace that we've seen today in practice translates into race pace on Sunday, also in the long run pace as well, which is kind of crucial. So yes, Perez, apparently some are also saying that they'll start from the back. So some are saying Perez is going to be all the way at the back, some are saying that he's not going to be all the way at the back, but I suppose we'll see on that one. But the big story really is that Verstappen will start at P6 at the best. The way this works is some people were saying, okay, well, wow, if Verstappen qualifies like P2 or something, and then like Hamilton and these other guys get demoted, then that P2 doesn't become P6, it only becomes like P3 or P4. That's not how it works. The drivers get penalized from like the worst penalty first. So Hamilton goes back, Tsunoda, Bottas go back, and then by the time they get to Verstappen, then he goes back behind. So he'll be P6 at best is basically how it works. Let's talk about free practice then, because the Red Bulls were not quickest in either of the sessions, but still in terms of long run pace, does look rather ominous for Max Verstappen most certainly compared to the rest of the grid. They were having some DRS issues though. I saw Perez's DRS panel kind of flapping around like crazy crazy, which I thought was interesting. Obviously, we've seen kind of that happen before with the Red Bull cars as well. So we'll see how that issue kind of mends itself as the weekend progresses. This was FP1, both for Leclerc and Sainz P1, B2, then Russell and Hamilton not far off the pace at all. Verstappen would probably have gone P1 here, but he was held up massively by Norris in the final sector. He probably would have been quick enough for P1 in this free practice 1 session. This, interesting though, are the top speed numbers. Now these, I believe, were maybe marginally different in FP2, with a Mercedes, I think, slightly quicker than this, but still we can see that the Red Bull and the Williams are the fastest cars. Ferrari relatively fast, Mercedes actually one of the slowest. Like, that's going to hurt them big time if that translates into the race weekend itself. But yeah, I mean, look at this top speed advantage. Like, Mercedes probably won't even, they might gain 10 kph by the DRS, because the DRS isn't so powerful around here because of the smaller rear wings. So I mean, like, honestly, Red Bull without DRS are probably going to be about as fast as Mercedes with DRS. So like, it doesn't bode particularly well for their progress through the field, but it certainly does for Max Verstappen from P6. I mean, look, the way he's won the previous races, you wouldn't put it past him to have no real issues winning from P6, but it is still like, you know, the ball is in the court of Leclerc and Ferrari to try and win the home race from pole position, where they will probably be, with Verstappen a bit behind them, right? So if he gets stuck, like, the win for Ferrari is most certainly on, but you know, obviously Red Bull believe, whatever, you know, however badly their engine is damaged or whatever, and they don't think it can last so long, like, I'm sure they still believe easily they can walk away with the victory this weekend, especially if these numbers are to be read into. This is in FP2, when Verstappen's average lap time on the mediums was over half a second quicker than Sainz's, which is pretty telling, right? Especially if the degradation issues that Ferrari have had in previous races and Red Bull haven't retained themselves around Monza. Like, that's a scary sign. If Verstappen's that much faster on a lap-by-lap basis, that's enough delta with the straight line speed advantage Red Bull have to make all the overtakes that is necessary. So definitely intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. And just this actually to mention as well, that I think it was actually this tweet that Giuliano De Kessa points out, that supposedly Ferrari used a higher power mode than usual today to better check the setup. So maybe they're somewhat at, you know, better straight line speed than usual. Maybe Ferrari is actually due to already running a higher power mode, and therefore not exactly the greatest sign for their weekends compared to where Verstappen currently lies. In the end, though, it was Sainz P1, Leclerc P3, Lando Norris with an impressive lap. But even with Verstappen starting from P6 at best, he's still going to be favourite for this race. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.